For a perspective from the Greens, I spoke to the party's deputy leader, Mehreen Faruqi. I spoke to her a short time ago. Mehreen Faruqi, welcome to the program.
Lovely to be with you, Patricia.
The Prime Minister says that what has happened in this case with Zomi Franklin is an outrage. Isn't that the sort of response we want to hear from the Prime Minister?
Patricia, today, like me, people across Australia are really angry and they are devastated. They are devastated for Zomi Franklin, for her family, for the 6 other colleagues of Zomi's and for their families, because Israel today has abrogated all responsibility and accountability for their murder. And of course, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister and everyone else should be outraged. But they were outraged more than 2 years ago when these murders took place. It's been years since that. And that outrage again and again hasn't materialized into any action, into any accountability. We had warned the Albanese government that this is exactly what would happen, that Israel would never take responsibility or accountability for these murders, and it was up to the Labour government to force accountability and to force justice for Zomi.
How could they have
forced them? The Labour government, I must say, has completely failed in their duty.
How could they force the accountability? Of course, everyone wants justice, but how does a country like ours force accountability?
Patricia, letting the murderers hold themselves to account was never going to work. There were a number of options available to the Albanese government. We could have had an independent investigation. We could have referred this murder to the ICC, which is what the World Central Kitchen at that time was asking for. So we could have sanctioned Israel. We could have expelled the Israeli ambassador for some consequences for this murder of an Australian citizen, an incredible aid worker who was committed to humanity, working in the most difficult conditions. And none of those actions were taken. So for me, again, an outrage again, and for a lot of people in this country, is merely words that mean nothing.
Penny Wong says Australia does not maintain diplomatic relations as an endorsement of any particular country. She's rejected calls to expel the ambassador and sever diplomatic relations. What is the point of severing diplomatic relations or kicking the ambassador out? What does it actually achieve?
In 2010, the Labour government then actually expelled an Israeli embassy official for misusing Australian passports. So I think this demands a much bigger reaction and action from the government. When an Australian citizen is murdered by Israel, I think we should expel the ambassador, because how do you actually have diplomatic relations with a country that has been committing war crime after war crime, that has killed 20,000 children, innocent children, and tens of thousands of Palestinians? It is really up to the government to show that for a country that commits genocide and murder of innocent people, there will be consequences.
So you don't think there's any utility in talking to them?
Sorry?
You don't think there's any reason to keep a dialogue, which is what diplomacy is about. Obviously, you can talk to people who you disagree with, but you keep the dialogue.
When a genocide is being committed, when Australian citizens are being murdered, when Australian citizens are being assaulted and kidnapped by a state, then I think it is much more important to actually take meaningful action that results in consequences and a change of behaviour.
Chris Sidoti from the UN Commission of Inquiry says we should swap out the ambassador for someone else. Do you agree that in part is a credibility issue in terms of this ambassador, or wouldn't that make a difference in your view?
I think we have reached a stage in the war crimes that Israel has committed that it doesn't really matter who the ambassador is. What matters is that we hold them to account and we put actions on them that are meaningful and that actually have an impact on trying to end the genocide, having a ceasefire, on ending apartheid, on ending the oppression of Palestinians. That is what is needed. I don't think swapping ambassadors will achieve any of that.
And do you think it meets the same threshold as the expulsion of the Iranian ambassador?
The threshold for expelling the Israeli ambassador was reached a long time ago. And yes, of course, if we have expelled the Russian ambassador, this should have happened a long time ago, Patricia.
The Israeli ambassador today talked about the anti-Israel sentiment in Australia, the protests, of course, just 2 days after the slaughter of Israelis, as a broader grievance about this country. That is a grievance that many have about the pace at which Israel was being rebuked after, of course, that atrocity was placed at that music festival. Do you understand at least that point?
What I know is, Patricia, and what people who are fighting for justice for Palestine know is that they have seen a live-streamed genocide for the last 3 years.
They also saw a live-stream slaughter. I mean, this is a different issue to what's happened with Zomi. I want to be very clear about that. But we also saw that live-streamed slaughter originally.
Of course we did. And I think people, criticized that and how atrocious it was. And it was. Any loss of innocent life is atrocious. But then what happened after is 3 years of tens of thousands of Palestinians, if not hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, not only killed, but starved, robbed of their homes. And even after the so-called ceasefire, the killing of Palestinian men, women, and children still goes on to this day. And that is why people are asking for justice for Palestine, and that is why they criticize the state of Israel, and that is why they're demanding action from the Australian government.